Next case study is on SDG 17. So we will see partnership for goals in Mexico. So let's see. Sustainable tourism is a key challenge in Mexico as it is a major source of income for the country. But it also puts a strain on the environment and local communities. Yeah, Mexico, as you may be aware of, is a there are a lot of tourist like sites, and there is a huge tourist inflow into that country. Okay, which is a major source of income, as it suggests over here. But yes, tourism also puts like a pressure on the environment, a lot of consumption, a lot of waste, right? A lot of emissions. Plus, like how the local communities are getting affected. That also points needs a consideration. So let's see explanation of the solution here. A partnership between the government, private sector, and civil society was established to address this challenge. The partnership focuses on promoting sustainable tourism practices such as responsible waste management, conservation of natural resources, and supporting the local communities. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. So if you see responsible waste management, so of course, as I said earlier, huge number of a floating population is going to consume a lot of resources which will be like a packaged and like ready to eat, and like all of those like a kind of things. There will be a lot of like a FMCG consumption, like a lot of like a transportation and all of those things, right? Then conservation of natural resources. It is possible that like these natural like places and like elements will also get like abused like in some cases, right? So how they can be protected, and finally like how local communities can be benefited like out of this, how they can be connected to this whole like economic activity, and how they can be like a part of this as a mainstream like a work, right? So let's see the outcomes. As a result of this partnership, several sustainable tourism projects have been implemented, leading to the creation of jobs and income for local communities. The projects also helped in protecting the environment and preserving the country's natural heritage. Yeah, so all of those three things were solved, and there are positive results. Let's see it here in the data. So overall tax revenue, if you see percentage of GDP wise, from Mexico, so it's World Bank. So here a little before 1975, it used to be at this point 7%, and then it grew to 13% here in 1983. Then again it fell down, right? And gradually it has taken this upward turn again in the year 2022. You can see over here, this is perhaps the highest as of today I see, which is above 14%, 14.3 something like that, percentage of the overall GDP is the now contribution from tourism sector. For exports of goods and services, percentage of GDP from Mexico, you can see this used to lie around like a 7%, and then gradually it is rising, it's going up, currently at 41.1 like percent in the year 2020, right? So you see like how it is like helping the like local goods and services also. Yeah, so implementation at international level, an overview of international initiatives and partnerships that have been established to support the achievement of the SDGs, which includes United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, financing for the development, Global Environment Facility. So if you see this framework, the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, UNSDCF, is a framework that aims to align the efforts of the UN system and member states towards achieving the SDGs. The UNSDCF is designed to support countries in their efforts to implement the SDGs and to promote coherent, integrated, and result-oriented support by the UN system. UNSDCF is a country-led and results-based framework that is aligned with national development plans and priorities. It is designed to support countries in their efforts to achieve the SDGs by providing technical and financial assistance, policy advice, and capacity building. The UNSDCF is also designed to promote greater coordination and coherence among the various UN agencies, funds and programs that are working on SDG implementation. You can refer the source. Well, financing for development, FFD, you can check the source out. Financing for development is an initiative that aims to mobilize financial resources from a variety of sources to support the implementation of the SDGs. The initiative is guided by the Addis Ababa Action Agenda AAAA, which was adopted in 2015 at the 3rd International Conference on Financing for Development, and it is consisted of 3 main elements. Mobilizing domestic resources. This includes efforts to increase government revenues through tax reform and anti-corruption measures, as well as efforts to mobilize private sector investments through measures such as public-private partnerships. Second, mobilizing international resources. This includes efforts to increase international development assistance and to ensure that it is effectively used to support the implementation of the SDGs. Third, enhancing the enabling environment for sustainable development financing. This includes efforts to create an enabling environment for sustainable development financing, including through policy and regulatory reform, and by addressing systematic issues such as corruption and financial secrecy. Next, we have GEF, Global Environment Facility. You can refer to the source. The Global Environmental Facility is a partnership that provides funding to support projects and programs that promote sustainable development and protect the global environment. The GEF's main objectives, you can see here, address global environmental issues such as biodiversity loss, climate change, and land degradation. Second, support countries in achieving their sustainable development goals. Third, promote cooperation and coordination among countries, international organizations, and the private sector to support SD. Right? The GEF provides funding to developing countries and countries with economies in transition for projects and programs in the following areas: biodiversity conservation, climate change mitigation and adaptation, chemicals and waste management, land degradation and sustainable forest management, international waters management. Now let's see Sustainable Development Goals report. Well, this report is available online. If you check, UN's website, you can download this report and all, previous annual reports also for free. It's a PDF, available for, anyone's and everyone's reading. It's worth, a reading. Since it gives you a comprehensive, a report on various, SDGs at various, places, how much they have performed and how much, attention is needed and all this. Is a very comprehensive, beautiful document, for knowledge seekers. A Sustainable Development Goals report is a document that provides an overview of the progress made towards achieving the 17 SDGs adopted by the United Nations in 2015. The report typically includes data and statistics on key indicators relating to each of the SDGs, as well as analysis and recommendations for future actions. So it's a very nice, as I said, earlier, it's a very nice document which gives you an idea of past, present and future. The SDGs report also provides a comprehensive assessment of the challenges and opportunities for achieving the SDGs and highlights best practices and success stories. The report is usually produced by the United Nations and member countries, and it's usually published annually. It can be used as a tool for governments, civil society and other stakeholders to monitor progress and identify areas where additional efforts are needed to achieve the SDGs. Okay. So there are a lot of indexes, given in these reports, where you will get a comprehensive idea about a very small individual topics. Here we have SDG Index and Dashboard Report by the Sustainable Development Solution Network, SDSN. Okay, you can search for this, another a platform for credible sources of data and statistics. The SDG Index and Dashboards Report by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, is a global report that tracks the progress of countries in achieving the SDGs. The report provides a comprehensive overview of the current state of affairs and highlights areas where progress is being made, as well as areas where more efforts are needed. It also provides detailed country level data and rankings, allowing for a comparison of progress across countries and regions. So you can see which country, which like a region is performing at what level, where you need to take examples from, like for example, if some success stories is there, it may be worth implementing or replicating at other places, right? So that can become a nice case study. Plus the places or regions where there is some deficiency, lacunae, or like it is falling short, if goals are falling short, definitely you can put more focus over there. You can go in a very efficient, localized like a way to deal with it. Yeah, so this is this online portal, and yeah, these reports. So in overall sense, for this unit, sustainable development goals are a crucial framework, as we know, for global development and progress. The presentation highlighted successful case studies from around the world, showcasing effective solutions and best practices. The presentation provided an overview of recent global reports on progress and challenges, highlighting the areas where progress has been made and where more effort is needed. It is clear that achieving the SDGs requires a collective and sustained effort from governments, organizations and communities, everyone. We must not lose sight of the fact that the SDGs are not just a set of targets, they are a call to action. As a global community, we must work together to achieve the SDGs and create a sustainable future for all. Now I am going to the Unit 2, Implementation at International Level. So here I have taken this case example. It talks about health in all policies, HIAP. So different stages of HIAP, in different countries, and its maturity across different regions. Okay, so in this, there are these examples where you can see how much of a maturity has been achieved in different places. Okay. So the region 1, we have South Australia. The level of maturity, it says mature. Okay. Case study title, Health in All Policies in South Australia, Lessons from 10 Years of Practice. Okay. So you can search for it separately, this title, and you'll be able to see a detailed, a study of these, all policies, how they have helped, health related, policies, for particular, this region to excel. South Australian Health in All Policies initiative is an approach to working across government to better achieve public policy outcomes and simultaneously improve population health and well-being. Established in 2007, the successful implementation of health in all policies in South Australia has been supported by a high-level mandate from central government, an overarching framework which is supportive of a diverse program of work, a commitment to work collaboratively and in partnership across agencies, and a strong evaluation process. Second, we have example from Finland. Status of maturity, it says mature, how to take into account health, well-being and equity in all sectors in Finland. So this is the title. Third, we have about Thailand. It says level of maturity as mature, Thailand's National Health Assembly, a means to health in all policies. Next, we have California, USA. Level of maturity mature, California Health in All Policies Task Force. Then contemporary New Zealand. Level of maturity is mature, applying a health in all policies approach to the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Strategy, the experience to date in Canterbury, New Zealand. Next, we have China. Level of maturity, it says emerging. Action plan for promoting healthy China, outline of the Healthy China 2030 plan. Next, we have Quebec, Canada. Level of maturity, it's emerging. Title, Government Policy of Prevention in Health, HIAP approach in Quebec, Canada. Next, we have Wales, UK. Emerging. Legislating for sustainable development and embedding a health in all policies approach in Wales. So you can search for these case studies separately. You will get to see very interesting examples and policy frameworks, implementation frameworks, like how they have done it. Next we have about Sudan. So level of maturity, it's new. Sudan's health in all policies experience. Then we have Suriname. It's in emerging stage of maturity, and the case study title is reducing the burden of disease and health inequity through HIAP, the case of Suriname. Right, this is a small but interesting country. You can look for it. Quito, Ecuador, if you see, level of maturity, emerging healthy neighborhoods closing the gap in health inequality, city of Quito, Ecuador. Next we have Namibia. Level of maturity, it's new. Namibia, developing a national strategy on health in all policies. Lastly, we have Zambia. Level of maturity as new. Zambia's experience in national policy formulation and how it informs the HIAP process. Yeah, so this is this South Australian health in all policies model. If you search, you can find it in full detail. Here we have on the first hand like a governance, practices and processes here in this circle, then outcomes, and yeah, so you can see formal agreement between central government and the health department, public health legislation to support systemizing HIAP across government, state strategic priorities, economic, social and environment to guide policy action. ESE aspects. In practices and processes, engage and navigate, engage and navigate, engage and navigate. At the level of, you see, engage, gather evidence, generate, navigate, evaluate, then again engage. So this is this, like a cyclic, like a process which keeps improving, the community. Outcomes, developing capacity across the system, increased understanding and action on the determinants of health, network of collaborative working alliances, and in long term, this was in short term. In long term, we have strengthened public policy outcomes, improved population health, well-being and equity. This is from Slovenia, Slovenian development planning model. If you see, it's like this, so overall quality of life for everyone, right? And then we have this systematic inclusive approach and equilibrium of 5 strategic orientations. Inclusive, healthy, safe and responsible society, high level of cooperation, competence and government efficiency. Then in center we have learning for and through life, well preserved natural environment, and then high productive economy creates added value for everyone, right? So this is how it works. You can search for more details. Another, like a slide where it talks about, like a high quality of life for everyone and how it progresses. So you can see, like a set of SDGs, like kept over here. Largely, if you see, our lives are touched, by all of these SDGs in multiple orientations and quantums, but they always touch, this is there. So several youth initiatives in all SDGs are taken. If you see this one here, the issue of housing available to youth in Slovenia should be adequately addressed. Young people in Slovenia face increasing market rents on the one hand and increasingly limited opportunity to obtain a loan on the other. In addressing the issue, both aspects should be taken into account, namely the responsibilities of renting, regulation of the housing market, as well as the possibilities to purchase, cooperation with banks in acknowledging atypical forms of employment. So there are several, interesting, good initiatives, taken in Slovenia. Okay. One is given over here, macroeconomic fiscal modeling, ECOWAS, right? And in the report, if you see, it's a very nice, interesting, comprehensive document which gives you the whole scenario. So I would suggest a reading. So in overall conclusion sense, if you see, in the 5 years of implementing 2030 agenda for sustainable development, Slovenia has shown through various legal bases and adopted strategies that it is ready to enter a decade of concrete measures that will make a key contribution to more effective achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, right? The preparation of the second voluntary national review on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals identified some key challenges for the effective implementation, right? So yeah, you can, I would suggest, like a comprehensive reading through this report. You will find it interesting. So now we are going to the unit 3rd, which talks about global reports, and lastly we will see like a few global reports also. So the first point here is about challenges to the SDG accountability. So there are various like stakeholders, governments, agencies, the private players who are playing like this mammoth exercise of like sustainable development, right? And while doing so, like how about talking accountability of those like stakeholders and all of those nodes and activities, right, which will bring a kind of a personalized like a input and like a feedback based like a system, which will be very helpful in achieving the efficiency, right? So you can see there is like this 5-point like a scale. So at the level 0 it says this is not a challenge, so it's taking it as not a challenge, and then we have level 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 over here, which talks about like very significant challenge. So here it says there is almost no challenge. Here it says a very significant like a challenge. So on this scale, from 0 to 5, like these like rankings are made. You can see the first one, lack of funding to support participation, 4.37 out of 5. So well, as I have been reiterating a few times, like a funding is very essential and crucial for implementing any policy, any framework or any like a such scheme. And since SDGs are global, it requires that funding at global scale, right? So well, at national level different countries are handling like differently, but how about if it goes, the whole thing goes like international, who is going to pay for it, right, becomes the first question, right? So that one. Then low awareness of the SDGs with citizens and stakeholders. Like we as a maybe like as a classroom like this thing are talking and discussing about SDGs, but how about a common person sitting in his household or maybe working on the street will get to know about like these SDGs, right? So I think reaching 20 to 30 is going to happen in less than 7 years from now. Okay, so we need to like increase and do this at priority ASAP. Lack of transparency from government, lack of institutional coordination across government, lack of inclusion of marginalized and vulnerable communities in national SDG progress, lack of entry points to engage with government on SDGs, lack of accessible data or lack of diversity of data, etc. So if you see, this is gradually decreasing. That means people seem to be convinced that it is not that good of a challenge. Okay, so they are kind of taking it for granted. Then here we will see some specific challenges to SDG, accordingly accountability by different regions. Okay, so you can see here North America and Europe, and there are a few more in the next slides. So just see, high ranked challenges are given in the left side and lowest ranked challenges are on the right side. So highest ranked challenges, lack of institutional coordination across governments. This we see typically in many other countries, including ours, where like some infrastructure projects, something actually keeps happening, and the other like agencies, they keep digging the road several times. So in one like a cycle of plantation, it takes like such a like a odd like this thing. Then we have low awareness of the SDGs with citizens and stakeholders, lack of entry points to engage with government on SDGs. On the other side, we have lower, like lowest ranked challenges. So restriction on freedom of association, translation lacking in local languages, inadequate internet access. In Europe, what is happening? Lack of institutional coordination across government, the same thing. Very few volunteers championing accountability at community level, low awareness of the SDGs with citizens and translation. Then on the lowest ranked side, we have translation lacking in local languages, restrictions on freedom of association, inadequate interest across, access. Next region we have Asia Pacific. So low awareness of the SDGs with citizens and stakeholders. This is the like a highest like ranked challenge. Maybe because of the lack of education or lack of like awareness or information. Lack of funding to support the participation. This is the second problem. Lack of inclusion of vulnerable and marginalized communities. Since there are a lot number of like people in this category, it requires more attention. Lowest rung challenges: translation lacking in local languages, lack of capacity of my organization, restrictions on freedom of association. In Africa, lack of funding is the major problem. Lack of transparency, so that means corruption is a very regular and kind of a deep rooted problem. So transparency in transactions. Lastly, low awareness of the SDGs with citizens and like stakeholders. So lack of information. Then on the lower rank side, if you see, we have restrictions on freedom of association, lack of capacity of my organization, stakeholder group, restrictions on public mobilizations and demonstrations. Lastly, in this series, we have Latin America and Caribbean, lack of funding, lack of inclusion of vulnerable, lack of transparency. What is more lowest ranked challenges? Lack of capacity of my organizations, restrictions on freedom of association, lack of or insufficient media and press freedoms. Lastly, to the Middle East, low awareness of the SDG with citizens and stakeholders. Fifth, like a 5 scale, like a problem, right? So if you go back and see, here this was the scale, from 0 to, like a 5, and we see in Middle East it is, like a totally 5. Lack of institutional coordination, lack of capacity of government or civil servants. Lack of capacity of my organization, stakeholders, lack of or insufficient media and press freedoms, inadequate internet access. Next, we have a perception of the government accountability for the SDGs. Rate your perception of your current national government's accountability for the SDGs. 0 is equal to not at all accountable, 5 is equal to very accountable. So you can see over here, this is the overall, like average at 1.94. Right? So, well, you may read you may write your perception like and you can count it. So here this is observed like like a Middle East has 0.9, North America has got 1.42, Latin 1.57, overall average stands little less than 2 at 1.94, Africa 2.09, Asia and the Pacific 2.37 and Europe 2.41. So it talks about like a perception regarding this. So well, nowhere it has reached like above like 50%. I think all are like under like this 2.5. Public awareness on that, if you see Middle East very little 1.2, North America 1.37, Latin 1.47, Asia 1.56, world's average stands 1.67. Europe 1.76, higher, Africa even higher, 1.91. That means people in Africa are well aware. Then we have a perception of global accountability for the SDGs, right? So overall in Europe 1.76, North America 1.79, 2.14 in Asia Pacific, Latin 2.16, world's average 2.34. And then Middle East 2.4 and Africa 2.72. So from not accountable at all to very accountable, this is this like a ranking. Then we have parliaments and SDGs. So how parliaments actually like help in policy frameworking, implementation, funding, like a monitoring, data collection and all of those things, right? So it helps in lawmaking, it helps in budgeting, or it kind of oversees oversighting, right? Representation and localization. So these are the major like a 5 keywords over here, like how SDG interacts with our like a parliament. Lastly, the UN system and how it works, it is given over here. General Assembly, subsidiary bodies, programs and fund, research and training institutes, other entities, and from here it goes to related organizations, advisory subsidiary body, economic social counseling also goes over here, security council, is a subsidiary body. Then secretariat, if you see, many of them have secretariat, functional commissions, regional, other bodies, then departments and offices, etc. So with this we have come to the end of the slide of this module, but we will have a look of one of the reports to see what is going on. Yeah, so here we have this report, the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2022, which is released by United Nations. So this is the latest copy we have, and this document is available online freely on UNSDG's website. I would strongly recommend everyone to download this report and go through this. This has all of these SDGs and their performances, how they have been doing, okay, and a few more pages. Yeah, so a roadmap out of crisis. So from here you can see these data sets which talk about different things. Like the first one, proportion of countries or areas with available data since 2015. If you remember, we have discussed in the previous modules, unless there is some data, unless there is some numbers, how will you be able to do something, like which place requires what kind of intervention. So first you need that reporting from that particular place, right? So it begins from there. So you can see different SDGs and the data, proportion of countries or areas with available data in them, right? So this is given over here. So if you see, none of these have like a 100% availability of data, and some are this one G13, if I see, is at 20%, okay, which is the least one among all, right? Proportion of countries that stopped face-to-face data collection. Here we have this data. Then proportion of countries that reported the use of innovative approaches to measure the impact of COVID-19. Phone surveys, highest 82. Then web surveys, administrative data, model-based estimates, etc. Proportion of countries that significantly improved ICT readiness in the past 6 months. Okay, and there are a variety of these data is given. I would recommend you to thoroughly read this document for your comprehension. And then from here we have these overviews of all the SDGs together. Okay, so yeah, first one, as you see, like no poverty, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So more than 4 years of progress against poverty has been erased by COVID-19. Rising inflation and impacts of war in Ukraine further derails progress. Number of people living in extreme poverty in year 2022 has actually swollen. So if you see pre-pandemic projection, 581 million to 657 to 676 million. Yeah, so if you see this, people in extreme poverty, this number has actually unfortunately risen, because of various reasons. Ukraine war is another, one of the reasons. Working poverty rate rose for the first time in 2 decades. If you see, 2019 this was 6.7, in 2020 7.2, pushing an additional 8 million workers into poverty. Okay, so this is this grave situation world is facing. It's going in a totally reverse direction. Unemployment cash benefits during the pandemic 2020. If you see, high income countries 52.2%, lower income countries 0.8%. Okay, so you see this disparity. Disaster related deaths rose 6-fold in 2020 to largely as a result of the pandemic, like this thing. And similarly, you can go through in your peaceful time. Okay, so SDG 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of these, they are given. Okay, very interesting facts and eye-opening, observations in this one. You can see this, climate action. There's a red siren, given over here. Climate change is humanity's code red warning. Okay, our window to avoid climate catastrophe is closing rapidly, and we ought to work. We have to work, fast on this. Okay, so very interesting graphic. but very relevant, like a data and inputs in this one, right? So go through this report, and each and every SDGs, like a datas are also given over here, and with this, right, you can see the details, coming from different countries, different regions. Yeah, so I'm leaving like this report with you guys. Please go through in detail properly, and yeah, thank you all for joining module 30. See you in the next one.